And in many cases, to be honest with you, you are. It's because whether you realize it or not, you're still speaking technical. Welcome to Life of a CISO. I'm Dr. Eric Cole, your host, and we'll be taking you on a journey each week on what it takes to be a CISO and what are solutions that you can implement today if you are currently a Chief Information Security Officer or if you want to be one in the future. This is Life of a CISO. Welcome, welcome, welcome to my favorite time of the week. I hope it's your favorite time of the week where we get to spend some time together. Even though it's virtual, I still feel like we're together with the family. We're hanging out on the couch, right? Having some nice beverages and just having a great conversation. So welcome, welcome, welcome to this week's edition of Life of a CISO with yours truly, Dr. Eric Cole. It is truly a pleasure to spend time with you, and I hope you enjoy it. And for those of you that are first-time listeners, welcome. I know you're going to get a lot out of it. And those of you that have been here before, welcome back. And as I always say, if you haven't picked up a copy of Cyber Crisis, not only for you, but for those that you work with, you're doing a disservice. Because one of the number one questions I get from CISOs or people that want to become a world-class Chief Information Security Officer is, Eric, I feel like when I go in and talk to executives or I talk at the boardroom level that no one really listens. I feel like I'm talking past them. I'm speaking a different language, and that's very, very common. And in many cases, to be honest with you, you are. It's because whether you realize it or not, you're still speaking technical. You're still speaking at a different level than they need to. Cyber Crisis shows you the level that you need to speak to executives. I did something, I'll let you in on a little secret, but after I wrote each chapter, I sent it to 5 CEOs to essentially rate from 1 to 5 in terms of how effective, how easy it was to understand, how easy it was to read, how easy it was to apply. And if I didn't get all 5s from all 5 of them, right, I rewrote it. So many of these chapters have been rewritten 6, 7, 8 times to get it to that level. So there's really a lot behind it than you might not realize when you read a chapter, but it's really written at the level for an executive to understand. And probably one of the biggest compliments was one of my worst reviews. I think I only got 1-star review. And like I said, even though it was a 1-star, I took it as the ultimate compliment. The person gave me a 1-star saying, I'm a big fan of Dr. Cole. I read all his books. I love his books. I love his detail and how he goes into attack vectors like a network security Bible. He goes, but this book was all about strategy. He didn't get enough tactical. It wasn't technical. I felt like it was written at too high a level and wasn't really written for the engineers to actively apply within the enterprise. So he gave me 1 star, and I wrote back going, thank you, right? I wish you gave me 5 stars. I said, but what you wrote, even though they intended it to be as a negative and a criticism, was a compliment because they were exactly right. This book is not written for technical people. I feel like that space is covered between my books like Network Security Bible and Advanced Persistent Threat and many of the other great authors and thought leaders in this space. To me, the technical space is covered really, really well. But we don't really have a good business book for executives. Now, yes, there's lots with titles, right? But the content is too technical, right? This book was really meant strategically. So while the intent was for you to buy copies and give them to your CEO, CIO, COO, CFO, and the board of directors, and we do that. We've given them out to a lot of folks, and we get great feedback on it. The secondary benefit that I didn't realize from Cyber Crisis was it's really a great book for CISOs on the level to speak. If you read that book and you go, oh, I didn't think it went technical enough, that's a good indicator that you probably go way too technical, right? It's written at a level, remember, I had over 70 CEOs because I wasn't going to use everyone for every chapter. So if I'm going to have 5 different ones review each chapter and do multiple reviews, right, you need a pool of about 70 people. So each one looked at different chapters, but there's a lot of validation going behind it to make sure it was speaking at that proper level. So if you don't have your copy or you haven't given it out, you're missing out on a great opportunity to educate and help those within your business. What I'd like to do on today's episode is something that's been coming up a lot, which is, Eric, what is the focus area of a CISO? Now, I think you know my high-level answer, and I'm going to go deeper. You know my high-level answer is going to be strategy, not technical. But even with that, it seems that a lot of CISOs spend most of their time putting out fires. And a lot of them says, Eric, what should we be doing when we're not putting out fires? When you say strategy, where should we be focusing and what should we be looking at? And what I'd like to do for that is let's go back to the foundation, which is, what is the definition of cybersecurity? If a chief information security officer is focused on building out a cybersecurity strategy for an organization to enable the business to be successful, then we should really go back to what is cybersecurity. Because until we really understand what is cybersecurity and what we're trying to do, it's going to be hard to know what you should focus on. And once we look at the definition, it becomes crystal clear. So let's go in. Cybersecurity is understanding, managing, and mitigating the risk of your critical data being disclosed, altered, or denied access. And I know I could sometimes speak quick, and some of you might want to write that down because it's important. Many people, and I'm always surprised of how many people, even folks that have worked in cybersecurity for 10 or 15 years, they don't know the definition. I go, what is cybersecurity? You know, it's cyber. No. So cybersecurity is understanding, managing, and mitigating risk of your critical data being disclosed, altered, or denied access. Boom. Now, if we dissect that down, the answer to the question of what should a CISO be focused on becomes crystal clear. There's three things in that definition: risk, critical data, and CIA triad: confidentiality, integrity, availability. Those are the three pieces of cybersecurity, and those are the three things that CISOs should be focused on in terms of their job. Now, I'm going to take them slightly out of order. So I'm going to start with the critical data piece. Every CISO should be able to tell me in a prioritized manner what is the critical data and business processes for an organization. So if I say for your entire organization, what is the number one business process and critical data store for your organization? Now, many organizations can go in and rattle off a bunch of things. But what's hard, but very important, that world-class CISOs do is they prioritize business processes. They prioritize business process and data stores across the organization, because if cybersecurity is about risk, and listen to last week's episode, right? You're never going to be 100% secure. There's going to be risks. So if we have to go in and every time we add functionality, we have to say, what is the value and benefit? What is the risk and exposure? Is the risk worth the value or benefit? Then we better know the prioritization of those critical assets. We better know what the impact to our organization is going to be if that critical data or business process is ultimately compromised. Now, this is where conversations with the executive team and the CEO are critical. You can't go lower. Because let me help you out here. If you go to the vice president of engineering and you say, what is the most critical business process? What do you think they're going to say? Engineering. And if you go to the vice president of marketing and say, what is the most critical business process? What do you think they're going to say? Marketing, right? And you want them to, because that's what their job is. If I have a vice president of marketing that when you say what's the most critical business process, they say something else, I want a new vice president because, right, clearly they're not focused and obsessed with their business unit, which they should be. That's their job. So in order to properly prioritize, it has to be done at an executive level. Now, the good part is this. Unless you do a major reorganization or you get acquired or you acquire new assets or things along those lines, that list isn't going to change. Minor tweaks, but it's not really going to change. So for most companies, that is going to be the same for 9, in some cases 24 months. So it's not like this is something that every week or every month you have to go in and be able to check with the executives. It's going to be something maybe once a year. Some cases, if it's a very stable, predictable organization, it might even be once every 2 years. But I find once every year doing a check-in with the CEO and COO on the list of critical business processes and impact to the organization is good. I'll let you in on a little hint if this is your first time doing it. CEOs and COOs at their level like to comment and modify. They don't like to create. So if you go in and you task, which is a bad idea to task, your CEO and COO, I need you to create for me the list of the top 20 critical business processes and data stores prioritized across the entire business. It ain't going to happen, right? Because that's not your job. If you report to them, you do the work. So even if you're not sure, put something together. Put something together where you say, you go to them and say, listen, this is a rough draft. I'm sure it's going to be altered and modified, but here's my current list of critical business processes, and I just want to go over it with you. So that's first step. When you're talking and dealing with executives, you produce the target and let them modify and change it. Second trick, do it in a meeting, not over email. A lot of people sort of love to hide behind communication and technology. I was working with a Ciso where every month we did our coaching. And I said, okay, do you have your prioritized list? And they said, no. I sent it to the executives in an email and they didn't reply to me. And the first month I'm like, okay, I like people to learn as opposed to me always telling the answer, because if you can learn, it's much more powerful. So I said, okay, learning moment. So I didn't say anything. And then second month, and then third month. And I said, okay, do you really think that is a valid answer? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, no. It's been 90 days. You've sent 10 emails to your CEO who runs the company and signs your paycheck, by the way, and they have not replied to you. And this is something that is critical for you to do your job. Do you really honestly think it's appropriate? And I said, but hold on, let's stop. Because sometimes personal things are hard. So let's make it third person. If I told you that that's what I did, what would your feedback be? And they would say, set up a meeting, pick up the phone, go to their office, and sit down with them in person. I'm like, you just got your answer. Don't send emails and put the pressure on them. If you need something, take control. Set up a meeting. I will tell you right now, if you put together a list of the 20 items and it is done some research, it should be pretty close. And within a 45-minute meeting, schedule 60 just for the normal chit chat, but in 45 minutes, you should be able to finalize that list. And it's real simple. You start at the top and you look at the first and second one and go, Mr. or Mrs. Executive, do we agree that number one is more important than number two? And if they say yes, great. Then we go in and we move down. Do we agree that number one is more important than number three? Right? And you do multiple cycles of this, and eventually the top ones bubble up and the changes modify. And after 10 or 12 iterations, you'll get the list finalized. So this doesn't have to be hard if you set up meetings and do it correctly. But if you hide behind email and technology and communication, it's not going to get done. So that's the first thing. World-class CISOs are aligned with their executives and crystal clear on the critical business processes. Then we move to risk. Risk is the probability of loss. And as we talked about last week, you have to accept risk. You're never going to be risk-free if you have functionality, and there are some risks that you need to accept in the organization. So now what you're going to do is you're going to go in and say, okay, for each critical asset, what are the top threats to this business process? And what are the top vulnerabilities that would allow those threats to manifest themselves? So now, world-class CISOs, and once again, you're working now with your team. So remember, a world-class CISO translates. They work with executives and they work with the security team. For step one of determining critical assets, you're working with your executive team. Then step two, where you're determining risk, threats, and vulnerabilities, you're now working with your technical team. So notice the CISO sits in the middle and you translate. You pull information from each side. So we pulled information from the executives on the business processes. We now take those business processes down to our security team and our IT team. And we now say, okay, based on the operating systems, the version, the application, the visibility, where it resides on the network, where it's hosted, what are the top 3 threats for each one of these? And you do that. Now, most organizations, you're going to start noticing commonality. So after the first 3 or 4, where you have a superset list of maybe 7 or 8 threats, those are going to be the same. So that's what you're trying to get to, is sort of what is that superset of threats that impact the organization? And it's based on threats to the prioritized list of your critical business processes and data stores. Once you know threats, remember, threat drives the risk calculation. Vulnerability drives risk reduction. Once you know what those threats are, then what are the vulnerabilities that allows those threats to manifest themselves? So what are vulnerabilities or weaknesses that would allow this to happen? And it could be things like single-factor passwords for authentication, unpatched systems, older operating systems in place, direct access to the internet, unencrypted data, data key stores connected, directly stored on the system. Remember, we're still in the technical discussion. We're still on that technical side of the house here, so it's okay. This is not what you're presenting to executives. So you're getting all that information. Then, once you have specific vulnerabilities, you're looking for superset. If you see that you have a lot of different applications that are out of date with different versions and missing patches, that means you have a configuration management issue. If you're noticing there are systems you don't know about or you're not aware of, then you have an asset inventory system. If you go in and realize it's because of everyone using passwords without 2-factor, then you have an authentication issue. So notice what we're doing now, where we're going deep technical into the threats, vulnerabilities for the risk, but then we're stepping back and saying, what are the broad strategic categories that I need to be aware of? Then, once you know those broad categories, that then starts to put together your strategy. We need to go in and do better configuration management. We need to go in and do better authentication. So that then goes back to the strategy piece. So notice a world-class CISO, and you do this so well you don't even realize it. You're speaking executive, you're speaking technical, you're speaking executive, you're speaking technical, you're speaking executive. It's one of my really good friends are Italian, and I laugh because they don't even realize it, but they're having conversations and they switch back and forth between Italian and English. So I'm not even going to attempt. I don't speak Italian. I wish I did. Beautiful language. That's one thing that's on my bucket list. I'd love to speak more languages. People that tell me, oh, I speak 3, 4, or 7 languages. I'm like, oh, that's awesome, right? That's so great. That's something I would love to do. I don't. I joke I speak multiple languages, but it's English, binary, hex, and C, right? And some of you get that joke. I do have a technical background on that front. But point is, they say a few words in Italian, a few words in English, a few words in, and their family perfectly understands. I don't, because I only speak one of them, which is okay. But that's world-class CISO. They're going back and forth between those. Business exec, business exec. Now, we're pretty close. We have our list of critical business processes. We have the data piece taken care of. We then have the risk piece taken care of with threats and vulnerabilities. Most CISOs stop there. And I'll be honest with you. If you just do those 2 steps, you'll be pretty darn good. And compared to what most companies and entities are out there, you'll be in the top 5%. So you'll be fairly elite in CISO land if you just do those 2 pieces. Because many CISOs and many companies do not. However, I don't want to be good. I don't want to be great. I don't want to be elite. I want to be world class. I don't want you to be in the 5%. I want you to be in the 1%. So then to get to that world-class elite CISO, we add in the final piece. And like I said, this is more of like the icing on the cake. It's not the critical analysis is done, but it's still important. Based on those critical business processes and the risk that we've identified, which of the 3 areas of the CIA triad are most important to the business? Is it the confidentiality of the information, the integrity of the information, or the availability of the information? And this one is really, really important because most organizations, when they think of cybersecurity, they only think of confidentiality, keeping secret secret. Prevent, detect, deter the unauthorized disclosure of information or sensitive data. And that's all they focus on. However, we saw how that bit a lot of organizations when ransomware hit. We had many clients that were targeted by ransomware, but no impact. They didn't have to pay the ransom, and you didn't hear about them on the news because they did this last piece. They knew that while confidentiality and integrity were important, the most important thing to their business was availability. And that's an interesting thing to think about. Most people, when they think about hospitals, think about confidentiality and integrity. We need to make sure that the patient information is really kept secret and it's accurate. But let's really be honest. If my patient information is disclosed, it's not ideal, but it really, other than maybe embarrassment or privacy, it really didn't impact my treatment. Whether somebody knows or doesn't know that I have a certain illness doesn't really impact the ability for the hospital to treat you. However, if the data that they're treating you for is not correct and the data is not available, imagine in the middle of a surgery, your critical data and x-rays that the surgeon is using goes away. It's not available, it's gone. That becomes problematic. So once again, this is something we can debate, but just from a perspective, in some cases, in some hospitals, in some medical, maybe, just maybe, availability and integrity are more important than confidentiality and integrity. Or availability is more important than confidentiality. And we started seeing that with the ransomware piece. So the last thing that you want to do, and this is a strategy component, is start going through saying, for each of these business processes, which is most important? Confidentiality, integrity, or availability? Which is the one we really, and then tally it up for all 20 and see the theme. See what the theme is. One of my favorite things to do is you come in with a pie chart to the executives, the CEO, COO, CFO, and you say, okay, For our organization, what percent of this pie, 100%, what percent of this pie should be confidentiality, integrity, or availability? And once again, remember, better to give them a target. Most of them are going to be like, I don't know. So what I do is 33, 33, 33. I say, okay, the starting point for the organization is they're all equal. So they each get a third of the pie. And then most executives are going to look at that and say, okay, but let's move this up. I was just preparing for an executive briefing for a large company. That's an area we do a lot in, of really being able to resonate the message. And I'm working with the CEO to prepare for this. And I said, yeah, let's do 33, 33, 33 as a starting point. And I knew what was going to happen, and it always does. And he's like, yeah, he goes, but really, Eric, if you really look at our business and this and that, it's because we have the storage, confidentiality, and integrity a little more. So I would say let's do 40, 40, 20. So 40 confidentiality, 40 integrity, 20 availability. And that's usually what happens. You're never going to get one of them to zero, but sometimes you'll take 5 or 10% from one to the other. Once again, don't worry about the specificity. We're not talking 37 versus 38. I was working with one company like, Eric, we're not sure if confidentiality should be 37 or 38%. Like, that doesn't matter. You're worrying about silliness. 1 or 2% error is perfectly okay here. I usually go zeros or fives. So it's going to be 15, 20, 25, 30. If you really want to do it, you can go a little bit more granular, but don't get caught up in the minutia of it, because it's not effective for getting the results. So that right there in a nutshell is what a world-class CISO does. A world-class CISO makes sure they have a prioritized list of the business processes. They then know the risks, the threats and vulnerabilities with likelihood and impact to each one of those. They know whether confidentiality, integrity, availability is the primary area of concern, and that's the technical analysis piece. And then they use that to build out their strategy that we need configuration management or asset inventory or data protection or data encryption as where we need to focus and put our energy and effort. So now you have the nice blueprint. What I always like recommending when I do coaching, and this I consider sort of a group coaching, my podcast, is be honest. Give yourself an honest report card. How well are we doing with critical data, business processes? How well are we doing with analyzing risk across them? And how well are we doing with confidentiality, integrity, availability? And then here's the most important part. What is one thing you can do in each area to improve it? One actionable thing you can do. Because what often happens is people get so bogged, we got a C, or we're going to give ourselves an F in this area. It's over. No. What is one thing you can do to start moving the C to a B and the B to an A? And then that's what world-class CISOs do. Once they understand the problem, they start taking steps one at a time to start solving and addressing it. I hope you enjoyed this week's edition of Life of a CISO. Like I said, I'm on a mission to make cyberspace a safe place to live, work, and raise a family. Many people that look at these podcasts think I'm crazy that I give them away for free, but that's what I love to do. I want to help you, and I want to assist you. And you can listen to these podcasts for free and slowly move towards being a world-class CISO, and that's awesome. But if you're one of those people that want to accelerate it, you want to go in and go from 0 to 60 in 3 seconds, not 20 seconds. You want to go really quick, really fast, and you want to get there in 6 months or less. That's why I created the CISO Cert. So if you go to secure-anchor.com CISO, or just email me, ecole@secure-anchor.com, and one of my great staff members will reach out to you and explain it to you. At least jump on a call and find out what it is. But I find that getting 40 hours of intense knowledge transfer, information that's not in the Life of a Podcast. So imagine what I'm giving you free in Life of a Podcast. If I have another 40 hours of proprietary methodology, just imagine how good that is. I have some good stuff there. So 40 hours of that coaching, Actual coaching with me, 2 hours, group coaching. We get on a call every month, knock out the big problems or issues you're having, private peer group. Like I said, you want to accelerate, take your career to that next level quicker and faster. Go to secureanchor.com.ciso, sign up for a consultation with one of my great staff members, and we'll take it from there. Otherwise, have an amazing, amazing week, and I'll see you next week on Life of a CISO.